So I thought that I wanted to share some stories with you about my own journey as a person who became a journalist, but also worked in tech and also worked in design, and how those worlds converged. And as time went on, I will show you in the slides, of course, that I realized that many of us have these convergences, but we just don't talk about them enough because we have titles that block us in this one thing that we do. So when I say interdisciplinary, what I mean by that is it's an individual who has at least two branches of knowledge, skills, deep skills, and when those skills converge, new things can happen. And I thought this was a really great way to open up a media party, because as I understand, it's an incredibly multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary group of people here, and you're all going to be collaborating. So I wanted to open up with that. So has anyone worked at the Wall Street Journal in this room? Somebody has. Amazing. So you probably know this stipple. This is a hand-drawn image that somebody we had artists on our team who built this, and there's an AI tool for it now, but I have to tell you, the handmade one is more exquisite than the AI one. So I wanted to start by showing you this building. Does anybody know what this building is? Shout it out. Yes, exactly. So I used to work in this building, and I lived in Paris for 7 years. And why I bring this building up, because I want to tell you how opening myself up to architecture has helped me in my job as well. This building was designed by Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers, came out in the 1970s. And what they did was they built it in a style that was called inside-out architecture. And what that meant was that usually everything that's inside a building, they put outside of the building, because they wanted the inside to be the best experience for the human and the art and the work of the humans. So the elevators were on the outside, the stairways, the pipes, the plumbing, the electricity, everything was on the outside. And what happened was in the inside, you could move the floors around, the walls were flexible, so that the vision of the human and the art could be maximized rather than being constrained by stairways and plumbing and things like that. So I was really inspired by this as my sort of first interaction with a human-centered design mindset. So what was I doing in this building? This is me many years ago. I worked at the Pompidou Center in the mid-90s. I was a student then, and my job was to teach the public how to use the internet. So the internet was becoming a major thing, and that was like a really exciting thing for me to do as a student. And actually, when I moved to Paris, I wanted to go to art school, but I also wanted to study literature. But I wasn't allowed to do both, so I had to choose one. So in the end, I studied linguistics, literature, and history while I worked here. So while I was on this job, a year later, the CEO who ran the technology company asked me if I would come and work for them. So I worked for this internet service provider, and then my job was getting French people, and people who lived in France, and companies in France connected to the internet, connected to the web. And so while I was studying literature, I was also working in this tech company, and the web was exploding, and so I learned how to code. Back in the earlier days, it was much simpler. It was very flat. I built my own website. I designed my own website. I became a professional web designer and developer. And the web was kind of Wild West then. Anything went. But something was bubbling inside me. I built my own website. It was kind of a little magazine, and I wrote my own stories. I designed my pages, and I built the whole thing. So I realized that this was what I really loved. I loved all three of these things. I didn't want to do only one or the other. Sure, I could collaborate, but I wanted to be part of that whole process. So I found that that was my sweet spot. I was really lucky. 1 year later, somebody from the Associated Press, let me go back to this first. Somebody from the Associated Press recruited me and said, would you like to come and work at the AP? I had never worked in journalism. I watched the BBC News all the time when I grew up in London, but I had never thought I would become a journalist. I wanted to be an artist, or I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know there was this other space that I could inhabit while keeping these three things I loved. So AP allowed me to come to New York. They offered me a job in Paris where I worked, and 1 year later, I moved to their building in Rockefeller Center. This is the old headquarters. And I want to show you this amazing sculpture that was commissioned by Noguchi. It was commissioned for this building by Noguchi, the artist. And if you look at this, it was like you imagine like a young journalist showing up in New York, and you have this image of journalism, which is this heroic image. Somebody on the phone, and you can notice too, they're all men. We've changed that ratio right now, thankfully. But AP hired me as an interactive news designer. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but it basically meant I could code my own stories, report them, research them, collaborate with reporters, and design them and ship them into the world. So that's where my visual journalism career began. I was brought in to work in the graphics team and then as an interactive team person in the news department. And so this is a John Berger quote. If anybody's familiar with him, he's an art historian, art critic from England. He wrote a seminal book called Ways of Seeing, which I recommend. It's a really, really great, thought-provoking read. And he says in his book, seeing comes before words. The child looks and recognizes before it can speak. So we kind of understand this intuitively, but it made me feel very constrained about what visual journalism was seen as. It was seen as something aesthetic, something that you looked at, not something that you experienced necessarily. So it took me on this journey to try and understand what visual journalism was. What did visual mean? I think text is visual, right? Text is a symbol, they're patterns, you have to learn to read. You've got people like this poet, Paula Clare, who writes poetry in shapes. This is a very visual poem. This is an actual great example of an interdisciplinary mindset. This poet takes a visual spatial experience with her text to give this poem new meaning. The visual and the text informs each other and makes it stronger. So I wanted to know how I could converge more of my work. So I did a little exercise. What does visuals mean anyway to me? And it's so many things. It's charts and data, it's photos, it's infographics, multimedia, interactives, illustrations, cartography, animation, design. I threw audio in there too, because I think audio should be part of visual experiences sometime. User experience, and the list goes on. Obviously, over time, visuals also is about performance. You know, how quickly is your digital piece going to load? Is it going to work on different screen sizes? Is it going to work on different platforms? I often thought, in the end, a lot of my work became as much a piece of software as it was a piece of journalism. And I was okay with that, and I think we should be totally okay with that. And I think a lot of visual journalists in the early days, they were the proto-product sort of teams. They were the first teams that were interacting with users and having to think about audience and users in very different ways than we did in print. So I would throw product in there too. So basically, I feel very constrained with the title visuals, but I embrace it anyway, but I wanted to unpack it. So then my career took off. My last job was at the Wall Street Journal. I worked at the Associated Press. I had all these different titles: global head of visuals, head of editorial products, Condé Nast portfolio. I took a break, worked in philanthropy. I recommend everyone to take a break and try another job for a while because it's really mind-opening. And then I went to Stanford for a while, and I know I have some JSK Stanford Fellowship friends in the audience. Maybe one of you could do a JSK Fellowship one of these days too. I know somebody in this room at Media Party was connected to the fellowship and did it in the end. And my work was around visual literacy and journalism. And so currently, I took a step back from newsrooms, and now I'm writing a book. No visuals, no visual poetry. It's just a book full of words, and it's been really exhilarating changing my mindset to that right now. And I'm doing a bunch of other projects. But in that visual journalism career, I had global teams all over the world. My last job at the Wall Street Journal, this is what the Venn diagram looked like. And what I want to point out here is that I oversaw both print and digital. Most of my career was in digital, so I had to learn about print, and I have to say I have so much respect for the print experience and the print product and the people who are experts in that field. Often what I ended up doing, I took some of our visual designers from and editorial designers from print and borrowed them for some digital work, because I think print designers have a sort of classical way, learned sort of craft, a way about thinking about design and art. And sometimes now I feel like a lot of web design has become very professionalized, very functional. It's very hard to break into, bring in new sort of typography and things like that. So that's where the print team would work with the digital team, and we'd come up with really engaging designs. Just a snapshot of some of the range of the work. And here's a really, really fun part, and I want you all to think about this while you're here. I spoke to 4 journalists on my team back in the day: a cartographer, a data journalist, a graphics editor, and a deputy graphics director. And I said, what do you do? What are the 3 things that you think you're really great at? And they all came up with these things. So we had the cartographer. First of all, they're all journalists. Anyone in the newsroom is a journalist. You're like working under the same rigor and expectations as any other format. So cartographer, she studied meteorology, and she studied mathematics as well. I also love the deputy graphics director, because it's not just about skills, it's also about deep knowledge. He has a deep knowledge in politics and American elections. But he's also a great data analyst, and he's also a pretty good designer as well. So you all have, I'm pretty sure, your own Venn diagram. So my challenge to you is, by the end of this media party, that you should all draw your own Venn diagram. And it could even be like, you could throw cooking into one of them. I'm a great data visualization artist and a great cook, et cetera, et cetera. So the other important thing is, I interviewed a couple of my staff and said, so what's your title? That's your title, but how do you describe yourself? So I have 2 examples. One is, I usually say data visuals reporter. It's important to me that both the visual side and the reporting side of what I do is emphasized. Another said, I'm a reporter, data wrangler, developer, designer, and illustrator. I work with data, interactive graphics, photos, videos, audios, and my absolute favorite, GIFs. What I think is important to note here is both have emphasized that they are reporters as well. They're not the other. They're not somebody on the side. They're not somebody doing like tech in the back room. They are part of the whole process of what we do in journalism. So again, this work goes through the same rigor, the same ethics and standards that any other story would go through. And then I have this one last thing. I was not sure whether to show it, but I wanted to come back to other lessons. I showed you a lot. We talked a lot about tools. We talked a lot about technology. As I get older, I realize where some of my other influences came from, and it came from my family. It came from my origins. It came from where I'm from. This is a picture of my nan, my mother, and me in rural Bangladesh, where in my nan's village, in her farm. I don't even know if I have to say anything. If you look between my nan, my mother, and me, you can see change. You can maybe imagine stories that happened that got to this woman who was born in British India, that then became East Pakistan, and then became Bangladesh. And she stayed there and lived on this village her whole life, no electricity, no running water. And on the other end, you've got me, who was born in London, born in London, does all this digital work. The transformation from my nan to me is so profound. So this idea of disruption and change is innate in all of us. I think if we also look deeper into our lives, I think we can find inspiration and threads that show us that the patterns that we learn can be transposed into other places. So over time I realized that this pattern of migration, of time travel. I think my mother came to London in the 70s from this village. That was more than just getting on a plane, that was time travel. And I think about these compressed ways we work now. I showed you my work in the internet. When the internet started, we're looking at AI right now and how explosive that is becoming. And we all should find where our tools are to be able to manage that change, to be able to make change innate in everything we do. And for me, I realize it goes right back to my roots. So thank you. And again, I want to see all of your Venn diagrams. And come and say hello.